Bienvenue à tous, merci de votre participation. Pour écouter notre session en français, veuillez cliquer en bas de votre écran sur l'onglet Interprétation et sélectionner le drapeau français. Merci.
On behalf of ICLEI Africa, the African Center for Cities, Our Future Cities, Surge Africa, and the Red Cross Crescent Climate Center, we are delighted to welcome you to the Rise Africa 2024 Action Festival. Rise Africa is a platform that brings together thinkers, doers, and enablers to inspire action for sustainable cities. This is our 4th edition of our Rise Africa Action Festival, which brings together insights, practices, and visions from across the continent under this year's theme of Solutions Only, Failures Also. This year's theme provokes us to change the way we view our cities and approach their development, particularly to promote a solutions orientation to our worldview. The festival invites you to embrace different ways of knowing, to seek ways to bridge science, policy, business, and arts in creative ways. It invites you to forge new partnerships, experiment with new concepts and ideas, and drive change in your homes and communities. This year's festival, we are running a social media storm to share how urbanization is happening in Africa, that cities can be centers of possibility, and how we can inspire action for sustainable African cities. Please share these for the days of the festival, including Africa Day, the 25th of May. As is tradition, we invite you to enter this session in a spirit of creativity.
Hello, my name is Gesha Aletta, and my poem is titled, How Can We Be Afraid of the Light? The hour before dawn rouses the birds. They sing their excitement for the light. We toss and turn beneath our covers. We choose sleeping rather than sight. Without resting, there can be no labor. We need the darkness for a season. When the time comes to turn the light on, we're beside ourselves with reasons. Why we can't turn off the beaten path, why what it asks is maybe decades or centuries away, why it's too great to bear the burden that change asks, why the fire and the light are dangerous because of the trails they blaze. He said, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. We want change to seduce us boldly, but only with the lights off. How can we be afraid of the light? How can we hide from the glistening of tears? How can we abandon our efforts and failures? How can we be corralled by our fears? How can we be afraid of the light? How can we shy away from smiling with all our teeth? Why don't we bind our wounds with laughter's balm? How dare we bury our humanity beneath? There's a beating heart in every chest, and it's longing for a chance to run towards the finish line, whether it comes first or last. Hearts aren't swayed by competition to cease beating because of the chorus of other beating hearts. When did we become renegades towards this intuition? Perhaps if we stop trying to conquer, colonize, destroy, dominate, is where winning starts.
In contemplating the urban project, we are in freefall, a condition of uncontrollable and rapid descent, a force that we can all collectively register fiercely. During this time, it's important to acknowledge and accept what is at play, to understand it and examine where and how to participate effectively with and within the inevitable. This is a time which summons calm, knowing perspective. I'm looking to share with you how to contemplate holding this fall with criticality and creativity. I'm an architect and urbanist concerned with how we design in and for a more prosperous and just urbanity. This is particular to contexts of extreme volatility, urgency, and limited resources. I'm interested to know how we deploy our economic, intellectual, and creative resources to arrest the systemic pressing issues in our society, and through this usher in a more hopeful outcome. This is not for some distant future, but more urgently and immediately for now. Towards this, I bring into focus South Africa's townships, a frontier territory, which wrestles with despair, chance, and rampant entrepreneurialism. This is a hyper-unregulated environment which presents one with a unique perspective on how to simultaneously occupy states of collapse and emergence. These frontier geographies reveal raw and unedited practices born out of necessity and opportunity. When carefully discerned, these urban conditions provide tangible registers of where we are and where we could go. We have a crisis. Can we just call it what it is? This is our polycrisis. As a gravitational force, it is gaining momentum with no sign of respite. This crisis is exacerbated by our inability to imagine an African city which is enabling and prosperous, to acknowledge the messy complexity and treachery of leadership, power, and governance, to understand the enormity of the challenge and to bring prosperity to the majority of our historically marginalized. The rampant underworld, and also the rampant underworld that has come to become an omnipresent, unchecked, and sometimes state-enabled force in shaping our cities. The growth and investment that we do see, however, is in the shape of private capital. This capital is fiercely fortifying itself behind hard and invisible defenses. This further frustrates our efforts towards an integrated society. Despite all our resources, institutions, and capability, collectively we have failed, dismally. Due to numerous bureaucratic and social challenges, our abundant technical expertise cannot meaningfully and effectively be deployed towards this crisis. As intellectuals and practitioners, we are rendered mere witnesses to a gravitational force with rapidly descending hopes. What then do we do in our acceptance of a free fall? Where then do we find the coordinates to make sense and navigate an alternative trajectory, following the inevitability of this fall? In contemplating informality, this informality that we speak may offer some coordinates towards new imaginaries during our free fall. This gravitational pressure, lack of delivery, structural inequality, and regressive policy are forces that result in this inevitable circumstances of informality and marginalization. In this sense, informality does not just happen by chance. I would dare to argue that it is something that we produce. In contemplating informality as a potentially productive practice, our curiosity could be more constructively directed towards some of its characteristics. For example, scale. It's important to note the scale, replicability, and incremental nature of informal practices. Furthermore, it is important to understand who is producing it. Without broad access and inclusion to land, property, citizenry, finance, and opportunity, informality as a set of practices will support the lives of those who are not supported. Where? Where is it produced? The sites where practices of informality typically appear at the intersection of opportunity and need. They are exacerbated at conditions where the state is supposed to be a provider of amenity like transport, logistics, security, border control, housing, liquor, and more recently, water and electricity. The inability for the state to provide services results in these being generated by other actors with or without the appropriate legislative authority. Can it be productive, however, in shaping a more desirable urbanism? I believe it can. It is a set of hyper-local and economic responses to a crisis and opportunity in an environment of limited regulation. These arrangements offer cunning innovation born out of resilience. These are circumstances which will come to dominate our urban African future and deem critical to understand, decipher, and harness. In principle, during this pre-fall, informality not only offers a catalytic opportunity, but carefully studied yields insights into alternative trajectories beyond this inevitable fall. We witness inventive new spatial typologies, real estate logics, and social arrangements that fundamentally challenge regulatory norms as to what our homes, streets, and neighborhoods should be. Things to contemplate within this freefall. We find our institutions, governance, and economic systems teetering on collapse. Leaning on the work of futurist Raoul Miller, I too accept that these systems are in a palliative state. This palliative state beckons a conscious attitude as to how to participate within the state of collapse. There are two simultaneous trends playing out, one of collapse and the other of emergence. The sites of radical and innovative emergence is centered around our informal practices in townships. We are left with two scenarios to contemplate. Serve the failing systems and its crumbling institutions towards its inevitable collapse, or build new alternative and parallel systems. I'm interested in deciphering new and alternative ways of constructing our cities within this freefall, to listen to the silent and powerful practices playing out in near and distant sites across our lands. I'm suggesting three things as we contemplate this fall. We need to accept what is not working. And through this, we need to understand that spatial integration will not happen. We are acting out our desires to create spaces of safety, predictability, and growth for and with those that share our values. Our current captured physical leadership will not be the driving influence of the social change we need and desire. Our broken physical infrastructure is here to stay, and we need to work around it. The scale is simply too large and complex to be resolved in the near future. We also need to make alternative pacts with unlikely partners. New actors sitting on various ends of the moral spectrum need to be acknowledged and invited into the co-production process. The agency of individuals across economic classes acting out their desires with their own resources, we need to harness this. We also need to invest in civic culture. The physical infrastructure is not the first respondent to this crisis. There is a myth that the infrastructure will solve our developmental issues. This is not true. Our physical infrastructure is fraught with incompetence and rigged. It is an expensive political instrument disguised as a developmental tool. Our infrastructure is poorly conceptualized, adopted, and maintained. A prerequisite, however, to physical infrastructure is sound governance, leadership, and citizen culture that can articulate the desires and appreciate the manifestations of these co-produced artifacts. We require a cultural project, one which clearly builds upon what it means to live together in cities through our differences, and to understand what our collective and individual rights and responsibilities are in living together. We also require a grounded and sophisticated public culture which will inform a quality set of infrastructure investments and produce an accountable, responsive, and empathetic state. We also require innovative social and cultural practices to create the basis for these inventive physical infrastructures. Thirdly, we are compelled to work in a bifocal manner, paying careful attention to the descent while simultaneously divining for alternatives that are emerging in the crevices of our cities. This asks for us to act small and large simultaneously. In our actions and contemplations towards the unknown and towards this possibly phantom future, it is valuable to consider working now, here, and immediately, and also working for the long, inevitable, there, and eventual. And not to be seduced by the future rhetoric that often defers the hard work needed now to secure that probable future. These are urgent and exciting times we need to occupy with cunning observation and quick thinking and instant action. I would like that we are able to intentionally make adjustments for our fall and find new currents and prosperous new trajectories, despite the inevitability of it all. Thank you.